I came across some amazing vintage New York photographs over the weekend that blew my mind. Forget about the standard Empire State Building shots that we're all used to. These images go further. We're talking New York when it was still trying to decide what it was going to be. The majority of individuals have never viewed these photos, which have lain dormant in neglected archives until now. So let's go on a tour of a New York that isn't anymore, but was all this. Daguerreotype of Lower Manhattan, 1853. This initial photograph is a gem. This daguerreotype of Lower Manhattan from Brooklyn in 1853 was taken by pioneer photographer George N. Bernard. This was pre-Brooklyn Bridge, pre-Statue of Liberty, when sailing vessels still ruled the seas. See how the coastline appears? Everything there has been lengthened using landfill now. Those wooden docks would one day become part of today's financial district. What's so powerful about this photo isn't the ships, it's the people. Immigrants who arrived here with everything they owned in a single trunk. Merchants with fortunes arriving on the tide. Working-class New Yorkers are simply trying to catch a ferry home. These daguerreotypes were so difficult to create. Bernard would have worked with huge, cumbersome equipment and dealt with dangerous chemicals simply to capture this one instant in time. Looking at what he preserved for us. Worth it, isn't it? Jacob Riis, 5 points photograph, 1888. This next one is rather spooky. This is 5 points as it was photographed by Jacob Riis in 1888, formerly the most notorious neighborhood in America. Charles Dickens came here and wrote that he had never witnessed such a place of horror and misery. What you are seeing is some of the most crowded slums on earth at this period. Look at those dilapidated buildings. This was a community revolving around the notorious old brewery, a brewery turned tenement where more than 1,000 individuals called home. The area was so notorious that, legend has it, a murder occurred here every night for 15 years straight. That's likely an exaggeration, but still, this wasn't exactly desirable real estate. Jacob Riis was a former police reporter turned social reformer who took great risks to report these conditions. His landmark book, How the Other Half Lives, used photographs like this to shock middle-class New Yorkers into supporting housing reforms. Today, this exact site is in Chinatown and near the courthouses. All that is in the photo was lost. Check this out. Broadway in 1857, as seen uptown from Exchange Place. It's an antique photo by photographer E. Anthony. I like it because it takes us back to this perfect time when New York was evolving from a small port city to the metropolis we recognize. See those horse-drawn omnibuses? That was the public transportation system before the subway. 5 cents got you a rough, uncomfortable ride anywhere along the route. And check out the ads in the shops. Jewelers, daguerreotype parlors, oyster saloons. Oysters were essentially New York's fast food in those days. Street vendors were hawking them everywhere. The wealthy, the poor, everybody ate them. The incredible thing about these early street scenes is how they document daily life. These are not posed portraits. These are actual people going about their business, completely ignorant that they're being recorded for us to view over 165 years later. Here's something that you don't normally see. Central Park under construction. In this 1862 photograph by Victor Prevost, the park is seen under construction. Previously, the area was an unplanned collection of farms, settlements, and even a village named Seneca Village, a community of many free black Americans who owned land there. They were all displaced to create this park. Over 1,600 people were displaced. Not exactly the warm and fuzzy creation myth that they put on the plaques. Look closely and you can spot the men at work. The park was constructed by Irish immigrants and some free black workers for a day's pay of about $1 for hard labor. These construction photos were commissioned by park designers Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvé Vaux to document their design coming into existence. The New York Public Library has preserved scores of these construction photos. When I see this, all I can think of is how we are walking layer upon layer of erased history wherever we walk throughout the city. This is a favorite of mine, a farm photographed by J.S. Johnston in Upper Manhattan in 1879, of what was left of rural life as the city moved north. It is the juxtaposition that lends this photo its power, whereas the southern half of Manhattan was already urbanized with densely spaced multi-story buildings. Upper Manhattan still had this rural quality with farmhouses and open fields. See those rock outcroppings? That's what Manhattan naturally resembled. They blasted most of them out or covered them with this development. When I'm walking around Midtown now, I'm trying to visualize this landscape beneath the concrete. These farms were already disappearing when this picture was taken. Within a decade of this picture, most would be gone, replaced by the grid system of streets and avenues we know today. The Museum of the City of New York has several pictures like this one, documenting this time of change in the city's development. Ellis Island's original immigration building, 1892. Look at this. This is the original Ellis Island immigration station as photographed soon after it opened in 1892. It's hardly recognizable from what we have now, isn't it? This wooden building was the first processing building before the grand brick building that we're used to. Unbelievable that this small building was the portal to America for so many. This unusual photo is saved in the National Park Service archives. The important thing is that this whole complex of wood buildings burned down in a fire in 1897, which is why the Ellis Island we know today is from 1900 and afterward. Practically nothing remained from this earlier era. The government even expedited the building of this first facility, converting the old naval magazine of the island into an immigration station in a matter of months. Over 450,000 immigrants were processed through here until the fire destroyed it. As I look at this nondescript building, I am struck by the reality that it is not what locations are, but what takes place in them that causes them to become legendary. You know what amazes me about all these pictures? It's not so much seeing how everything used to be, it's knowing that the people in these pictures had no clue what New York was going to turn into. They were just living their lives in what was, to them, a modern city. That's what I adore about photography. It freezes a moment that no one realizes was important when it happened. Just Another Tuesday in 1860 becomes this priceless window into a lost world. Let's keep going. This amazing photograph captures the Bowery in 1895, taken by photographer Byron Company. Although not a nighttime photo, you can still get a sense of the busy nature of what was then one of New York's most lively and infamous streets. The Bowery was New York's nightlife district, with salons, theaters, dance halls, and museums. Notice those elevated train tracks up above, with shadows falling to the street. This L train transformed the character of every street it touched. This image is part of the Museum of the City of New York's Byron Collection, which contains over 22,000 glass plate negatives of street scenes from this era. What's wonderful about this image is the way it captures the everyday hustle and bustle, ordinary New Yorkers just going about their business. Observe the combination of transportation, horse-drawn wagons, and electric trolleys. This was a transitional period in city transportation, with several systems running concurrently. Now this strip appears to be a different place entirely. The Bowery remains the Bowery, at least in spirit. Ever-changing, yet somehow never changing. This one is heartbreaking, but must be told. This is a photo taken around 1890 of kids at the 5 Points Mission, one of a series of institutions that took care of New York's homeless and impoverished children. These children were among the thousands who existed in squalid conditions in the city tenements. Some were taken into custody of institutions such as the Children's Aid Society, which infamously operated the Orphan Trains program that relocated more than 250,000 children from New York to rural America from 1854 to 1929. Look at their faces, their clothing. Behind the guarded stands, wariness and hope can be sensed. Jacob Riis photographed numerous such children as part of his crusade to better the lives of the city's poor. What became of these particular children? We cannot say. Some of the children of these missions went on to lead impoverished lives. Many others remained trapped in a system that did not do much for those who were poor. The Library of Congress and the New York Historical Society maintain photographs such as these as valuable social history documents. Here's something incredible. The Brooklyn Bridge under construction, captured by Joshua Beale throughout the construction period from 1872 to 1883. These incredible photographs show the massive towers being built and the cables being spun. The workers, so-called sandhogs, were digging in pressurized chambers under the East River. Many of them were suffering from what they called the bends, which we now know as decompression sickness. Over 100 workers were seriously hurt in the construction, and at least 27 were killed. The New York Public Library owns an important collection of these construction photos, which were commissioned by the bridge builders to record what was, at the time, the world's longest suspension bridge. Washington Roebling, who became chief engineer after his father's death during construction, would eventually directly oversee the entire project from his apartment window after being partially paralyzed by his bout of decompression sickness. His wife Emily Warren Roebling served as his intermediary, taking instructions to the site and de facto running the project. Each time I drive over the bridge nowadays, I always wonder about these men laboring in the darkness and mud below the river. The next time you cross over, you might wonder about them too. This evocative photo of a family in their Lower East Side tenement apartment circa 1889 attests to the fact that families of up to 12 individuals occupied each of these dark, poorly ventilated spaces that were sometimes no bigger than 400 square feet. Its photographer was Jacob Rees, a police journalist who gained fame by documenting life in tenements. His book, How the Other Half Lives, employed photography for social change. Rees himself had lived homeless when he first arrived in New York as an immigrant, so he identified with what he photographed. Look at the overcrowding, the lines of garments above, and the few pieces of furniture. One bathroom would need to be shared by 20 or more families. Disease was widespread in these structures. What's wild is that some of these buildings are still standing. They've become renovated, of course, divided into expensive apartments with exposed brick that now considered charm rather than sign of poverty. I went in search of some of these buildings last year. Most of them are preserved on Orchard Street in the Tenement Museum. The facades are the same, but the streets now have boutiques with $200 jeans lining them. Now here's something completely erased from the city. The Croton Reservoir that once stood where the New York Public Library is now, at 42nd and 5th Avenue. This massive Egyptian-style fortress photographed here by J.S. Johnston in 1879 held 20 million gallons of water for the growing city. It was 50 feet high with walls 25 feet thick, a true fortress in the middle of Manhattan. The New York Public Library has preserved several photographs of this structure in its digital collections. The Murray Hill Reservoir, as it was also known, was part of the Croton Aqueduct system that brought fresh water to the city from upstate. When they tore it down in the 1890s, people gathered to watch the walls fall. Hard to imagine this imposing structure was one of the city's major landmarks, right? Now it's a place where tourists take selfies with stone lions. The city just keeps eating itself and being reborn. This remarkable photograph shows Madison Square and Fifth Avenue in 1893, captured by photographer Alfred Stieglitz. Look at the mix of horse-drawn carriages and early automobiles sharing the road. Traffic was already becoming an issue in New York, with accidents being a daily occurrence. The city was adapting to new forms of transportation while still relying heavily on horses. Notice Madison Square Garden in the background, not the current one, but the second incarnation design by Stanford White, with its distinctive tower modeled after the Giralda in Seville, Spain. This building was demolished in 1925. What I find striking about this image is how it captures everyday life. These aren't actors or posed scenes. These are real New Yorkers going about their business, caught in a moment that would have been completely forgotten if not for this photograph freezing it forever. Fifth Avenue looks nothing like this now. Where these horse carriages once traveled is now a constant stream of yellow taxis and delivery trucks. This view by photographer J.S. Johnston shows Broadway looking south from Trinity Church around 1880. For decades, the 281-foot spire of Trinity was the highest point in the city. The first thing sailors would see approaching New York Harbor. The New York Historical Society preserves this image along with others taken from this iconic vantage point. Photographers would have to haul their heavy equipment up the narrow spiral staircase to the top of the church steeple. What strikes me about this image is how low everything is. That would all change dramatically within a generation as steel frame construction allowed buildings to reach unprecedented heights. If you took this same photo today, you'd be looking at the canyon of Wall Street and the massive towers of the financial district. Trinity Church is now completely dwarfed by the buildings surrounding it. This view doesn't exist anymore. It's buried under a century of ambition and steel. You know, searching for these photographs took me to some strange places: dusty archive rooms, private collections, and historical society basements. Each one tells a story not just about what New York looked like, but about who we were as people. The New York in these images was a place of extremes, unimaginable wealth alongside desperate poverty, a place where fortunes were made and lost daily, a city perpetually tearing itself down and rebuilding. Sounds familiar? For all that's changed, the skyscrapers, the technology, the society, something about New York remains stubbornly the same. That restless energy, that sense that anything can happen on any street corner. I look at these photos and I don't see a foreign place. I see the bones of our city, the skeleton that still supports everything we built on top of it. Next time you're walking down Broadway or crossing the Brooklyn Bridge or cutting through Central Park, try to imagine what was there before. The layers of history under your feet, the countless stories that played out on the very spot where you're standing. Because that's the thing about New York. It's not just a place, it's a continuum. We're just the current custodians of streets that have held millions of lives before us, and will hold millions more after we're gone. These photographs are windows into the continuum, proof that while buildings rise and fall, while fashions change and technologies advance, the essential character of this impossible, magnificent city somehow endures. Thanks for taking this journey with me. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden history, and let me know in the comments which of these photographs spoke to you the most.